Hello everybody, welcome back. I can't believe it's been a week already. Great to be back. I think rather than looking at DVDs, we're going to look at the old-fashioned DVDs, which I call books. I'm going to show you some of the books in my collection. With the corona and everything going on and the self-quarantine, I've been reading a lot. And I got into some of my collection, which I haven't been into for a while. I guess they say dig into the archives, but nonetheless, I got a lot of books out that I have read, and I'm going to read. A couple of them you've seen kind of previews of in some of Mindy Minx's videos, but I think I'll show you kind of more in depth of what I have here that I've been reading and what I'm going to be reading soon. One of the first books, or actually the book that I'm reading now, is the President's Commission on the Assassination of President Kennedy, the Warren Report. Now, this is a 888-page book that it's a tough read. The content of it is amazing, but it's a lot of reading. For those who may not want to read 888 pages of text, the Associated Press in 1964 came out with a printed version, a little bit smaller. The print is smaller in columns, and then when you get near the end of the book, it goes into a full page instead of the columns. It's a lot of reading. I'm not going to say if this report was flawed, if there's conspiracy theorists or people that have their own opinions of what happened. This was commissioned by President Johnson to try and dispel any rumors or conspiracy problems. I don't think it worked real good. The Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren headed up the committee. He was kind of reluctant to be involved in it because he feared it would stir up a lot of questions and things that they couldn't answer. It's 888 pages, and go along with this book, there's 26 volumes of additional information or information that they've compiled from those volumes into this, the final report. I thought it was something where I was going to be discouraged because at the time in 1963 they didn't have forensics and things available that we have to us now. So I was going to compare what I was used to and what I had available to me in a small police department to what the Dallas police, the FBI, everybody involved in the investigation had back in 1963. I was amazed at the thoroughness and the detail that they went into doing this, the amount of depositions, the amount of witnesses. And again, I'm reading this. My brother read it. He's told me numerous times that he read this cover to cover. And it wasn't until recently that I thought, you know what, I'm going to read it, and was able to get a copy and then the Associated Press copy also. This is just a slightly condensed version of this. This has, I think, 300, and I got it down to 366 pages. And I'll put this on here and see if that will focus. You can freeze frame that and read it to get a better idea of what they did to get this down to 366 pages, if you're interested. So I am in the process of reading this now. I was at a thrift store before Corona went crazy, and I was able to find The Death of a President, November 1963, by William Manchester. I'm not exactly sure what this is. This was at a Goodwill. I think I paid at most $6 for this. I think they have a set price for paperback, and for hardcover it wasn't very expensive. I don't know if William Manchester is reporting the facts of the assassination or if he's jumping into theories and things of that nature. Like I said, I haven't read this one yet, but this is on the radar here in the near future. I have another book that I purchased. I think this was $5. Lee Harvey Oswald and the Assassination of JFK by Gerald Posner. And again, I haven't read this, so I don't know if this is factual, if this is a day-by-day of what they generally refer to as the 4 days between November 22nd and November 26th. So I have to read this, and I will let you know in a later video. So I have those two. I also found, and I love these, it's kind of like a digibook, but it's not. And for those that don't know what a digibook is, it's a book that comes with a DVD, and they have, I have one that I can show real quick. This one's of the Shawshank Redemption. It comes with the DVD in the back, but then there's a whole booklet with pictures and different things relating to the movie and director's comments and things of that nature. I kind of like those things. But this book involves the shooting of the president and then experience a moment-to-moment account of the 4 days that changed America. And in the back it has, no, I lied. In the front, it has a DVD that has news broadcasts and radio broadcasts and things that happened during those 4 days. It was the shooting of the president, the shooting of the governor of Texas, the shooting of a Dallas police officer, the arrest of Oswald. You have the swearing in of a new president on Air Force One. Then you had Oswald being gunned down in the police station basement when he was being transferred from the city jail to the county jail. You have the capture of his gunman, Jack Ruby, and then you have the trial of Jack Ruby. And in between all that, you had, of course, the burial of President Kennedy. So I found this, I think, maybe at Books A Million. I might have picked that one up. And then again at Goodwill, we interrupt this broadcast, relive the events that stopped our lives from the Hindenburg to the death of Princess Diana. In the front, it's got the Hindenburg, Man on the Moon, Jack Ruby shooting Oswald, and a picture from the Oklahoma City bombing. And this is in the back. It has CDs of actual news broadcasts and things of that nature. I like books like this that you can actually hear the history as you're reading the history. And then another book that I have not read yet is Assassination Robert F. Kennedy, 1925 to 1968, by the editors of the United Press International and Cowles. So if you didn't know, Robert Kennedy was running for president in 1968. He had just won the California primary and had a celebration at a hotel, I think, and was leaving the hotel through the kitchen to get away from the hotel, and he was shot in the head. And they captured the gunman, but that's what this is going to be about. Coming from Cleveland, I have a couple books that I just recently purchased on Cleveland history. Both of these books are about the Dr. Sam Shepard murder trial, July 3rd, 1954, in the city of Bay Village, a very quiet, affluent community west of Cleveland on lakefront property, Lake Erie. Dr. Sam Shepard said that a fuzzy-haired intruder, I think was what he described it, came into his house and knocked him out, and in the process of him being knocked unconscious, the intruder was able to go upstairs and murder Marilyn Shepard, Dr. Sam's wife, in the master bedroom. And I found 2 books on that. He was found guilty in the first trial, got a second trial, and was acquitted. There was another trial several decades later. Keeping with the Cleveland, Ohio theme, I found a book, The Years Were Good, by Louis B. Seltzer. He was the chief editor of the Cleveland Press, his life story and his rise to the editor of the Cleveland Press. I also have a book that I did read about the brothers who lived in North Ridgeville that actually started the Cleveland Plain Dealer, which is still being published, kind of. They're having some severe problems. but the press, I think the last year they published might have been in the early 80s, maybe late 70s, early 80s. So we're going to read about him. I have not read that one yet. And another one is My Story by Tom L. Johnson. And he was the mayor of the city of Cleveland. I think he was elected in 1900. This is copyrighted 1911. So it's his rise to fame and what he dealt with as mayor of the city of Cleveland. If you go to Cleveland Public Square, there's going to be a statue where he's going to be facing down the street towards the courthouse. He's going to be seated in a chair. That would be a statue of Tom L. Johnson, which is what that book is about. Okay. And then the last Cleveland-related book I have is The Search for Adele Parker. Adele Von Olle Parker. She replaced Annie Oakley in Buffalo Bill's show. I don't know if she was that great of a marksman with a pistol. I don't know if that was her forte, but her expertise was with horses. She was one with the horse. She was notably, arguably one of the finest horse riders in the world. She could do things on horses that people couldn't do on their feet. Her family, the Von Olles, were German-born and relocated to New Jersey. They were having horses in their blood forever. They were reportedly the source of horses for George Washington, General George Washington, during the Revolutionary War. She hooked up with Buffalo Bill and replaced Annie Oakley. She was in the early 1900s one of the highest paid actresses in the city of New York. She was one of the first females to not ride side saddle on a horse, and she was just amazing. Her big act in New York at the Hippodrome Theater, which was the largest theater in the world at the time, she would be on a horse and jump off a elevated platform, and I still haven't found out how high the platform was, but they would jump off into a big pool, and her and the horse would ride out of the pool. But she owned property in North Olmsted, which is where I worked. She passed away, I think, in 1967, but the people in the city that knew her still talked about her. I answered a couple of calls on the property where she used to live. They still have animals there. They still have horses. They have a lot of different animals. There's an Ohio historical marker in the front of the property. And the property is right on the edge of the Cleveland Metro Parks, which is a very large, beautiful park that has the Rocky River, which runs from Lake Erie south all the way into Medina County, which is quite a ways. At one point we had a bull. It was only about 1,000 pounds, but he got away from the barn and ran down the hill into the park, which is the same trails that she used to ride the horses. And she taught kids. She loved children. She loved horses. She had dozens of horses, and every summer she'd have camps and teach kids how to ride, and used horses to basically kind of as a therapy. She'd have Wild West shows. She'd have Mother's Day shows. She would hire American Indians to come and do the Wild West show. They were constantly shooting blanks in their pistols and doing all kinds of shows. Kind of drove the neighbors a little bit wacky, but they all loved her. We chased this bull around for an hour trying to catch it and get it up. I think it was younger. That's why it only weighed 1,000 pounds. And I think he was happy to have people to play with because he wasn't really cooperating. Eventually a Metro Park Ranger, which is the park police, had come, and the bull kind of took a liking to him, and they walked up back to the barn, and he had it almost in the barn, and I don't know what happened, but the bull took off, and this time instead of going to the back, he went to the front, down the road west, crossed over a state route into another housing development, and the chase was on again. He wasn't cooperating. I think he had rested up and was wanting to play again. But we had calls at the police department from people that said, hey, I need to get to my car to go to the grocery store, and I swear there's a bull standing out next to my car. I don't want to leave my house. I haven't been drinking. What should I do? I said, yeah, it's a bull, and don't leave your house, so we'll come down here and try and move it. I think it took 3 days. It moved a little bit further south, but they eventually were able to get somebody that had a tranquilizer dart that they could shoot the bull with to knock it out. But the problem with that is when you have a 1,000-pound animal that you render unconscious, you have to do something with it so it's not laying and suffocating as it's laying. So they were able to make arrangements to have not only the person that had the tranquilizer dart, but also somebody that had a trailer and means to get an unconscious bull from the ground to the trailer and get it back. So it took probably 3 or 4 days, but it eventually worked out well for the people that lived around there and for the bull. But this is her story by Robert Charlton Hull, and I also have some of the old programs from a Wild West show, and then some from her Mother's Day shows. This is from 1947, and then a newspaper article about her and her career in New York. She had a lot of famous friends. She married Jim Parker, which was a Hollywood actor, but this is back in the days of vaudeville and silent movies. Some of the actors that she knew that came to her property in North Olmsted were Tom Mix, Gene Autry, Buck Jones, just hundreds and hundreds of kids, hundreds of ponies, goats, dogs. She had all kinds of animals, and there's still animals there to this day. This is signed by the author of the book to one of the legions of Parker's ranchers who one day fell in love with a place, a life, and particularly with the magnificent lady Adele Von Old Parker. May there always be a Parker's Ranch somewhere in the world. Kindest regards, Robert Hull. So he signed the copy of this book, and then I have the Mother's Day program, or the Wild West Buffalo Bill program from 1960 that was autographed by Adele Von Old Parker. And I have read this one. It's a good read. I have a couple books that I picked up at Ormond Beach, Florida. One of the Clevelanders was John D. Rockefeller, who's buried at Lakeview Cemetery in Cleveland, Ohio. He founded, I think, Standard Oil, moved to New York, made a lot of money in New York, and he owned a summer home that was in Florida, and that was called the Casements, which was named after casement windows, which is prominent in the construction of the house that he had there. So we visited the house, but we didn't take a tour of the ground or the building. We toured the grounds, and I was able to pick up a couple books which I want to read. Another book that was shown on an earlier video that I did read was World War II in Minutes. It's kind of a quick read. It's got one half of text and the other half a photo of what they're talking about, and it just basically goes over World War II from start to finish. That was neat. I learned a lot of things that I didn't know from that. Part of my duties as a police officer was the data master or the breathalyzer, and one of the things that we were tested on, I think it was every 2 years, on the Ohio Department of Health, was the effect of alcohol on the body and how long does it take to absorb and all of that, all of the things that we had to take a test on. But I found a book that was printed in 1898 by Frank Overton, MD, which is part of an applied physiology course that has the effects of alcohol and narcotics. And I'm just curious to read this. I just picked this up recently. I want to take a look at it and see if anything has changed from what I was tested on annually or semi-annually with the state of Ohio, or what they knew back in 1898. So I'm going to be looking into that and reading that. One of the Minks and I's favorite thing was The Greatest Showman. And we were fortunate enough to be able to see, hey Mink,
Yeah,
The Greatest Showman.
Jackman.
Hugh Jackman. Mink and I were fortunate enough to be able to see Hugh Jackman in concert in Tampa, and we have the CD soundtrack from The Greatest Showman that we like to listen to quite a bit. And I found a book written by P.T. Barnum, and this was written in 1873, that is basically the book version of the movie The Greatest Showman. It has the Jenny Lind franchise information and the Great Fire that destroyed his first circus that he did in New York. But this is basically the book version of that movie. One of the commenters on one of my videos asked me if I was familiar with Violet Jessup, and she survived the Titanic sinking, became a nurse, and was on the Britannic, which was struck by a mine, they think, around World War I, and sank. And she was a nurse on that ship and survived that, although she was severely injured on this one. She got out of the Titanic pretty much with just, I think, exposure, being in the cold. But this is her memoirs that were discovered, I think, in the 1930s when she passed, and it was published in the 50s. This copy I just picked up, and it was from 1997. So it's out there if anyone's interested. This was done by Violet Jessup, John Maxtone Graham, Sheridan House Publishing is who did the book. Another book that I've read was The Collision Course by Alvin Moscow. And this is the story of the collision between the Stockholm and the Andrea Doria that took place in July 25th, I think, of 1956. The thing I like about this is it's an Easton press book. They have the amazing bindings and the spine with the ribs in it, and they do the gilded edges on the pages. I really like the finish on these books. So I think the original book was written maybe in the late 50s, and this was done by the Easton Press. The original was done in 1959. The special contents of this edition are copyrighted 1988. But I was able to get this. This is a great read. It goes into a lot of detail on both ships. I also have The Mighty Fitz, the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald in the Great Lakes. Unfortunately, there was 29 people killed in this. There's a song by Gordon Lightfoot that, for someone to make a song out of words describing very detailed historical, kind of a step-by-step of a historical event in music and nailing it. Kudos to him for that. But there was one of the crew members lived in the city that I worked in for years. So I have not read this one yet. I also found The Titanic Tragedy, God Speaking to the Nations. This was done in 1912 by Mrs. Alma White. And I haven't read this one, but I think she's kind of making a religious statement on the sinking of the Titanic. And I have not read this one yet. Usually I can read a book about this size in a day. I'll read until the Mink gets up, if I get up before she does. Mm-hmm. And then take a break and then read some more chapters in the afternoon and evening. If she's going to be listening to her audiobook or reading one of her Harry Potter books, I'll go ahead and finish the book in the evening. And I can generally get through a book like this in a day, so I will get caught up pretty quick. Another one is Unsafe at Any Speed, by Ralph Nader. This was done, I think, in 1965. I, along with a lot of people, thought that this was pretty much a story on the Chevrolet Corvair and only the Corvair. I was wrong. There is 8 chapters in this book, and I think there's only one of them that deals with the Chevrolet Corvair. Basically, what this did was it made the automobile industry in America accountable if they make a product that is unsafe because of a design flaw or materials that were used that don't hold up. He said that if you built it and you know there's a problem with it, then you should be responsible for fixing it. And that's pretty much how the start of automobile recalls came. And he talks about, and just glancing with this because I haven't read it, he talks about some of the other, he mentions a Buick from the 50s that has an all-steel dash and all kinds of other stuff that's unsafe. It's not just an attack on the Corvair. So I'm looking forward to reading this one. And another of the Eastern Press is the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. And again, a very fancy binding, the rib spine and the gold on the pages. I'm looking forward to seeing this. When Mindy and I were in Philadelphia, we went to the cemetery where Benjamin Franklin, and I think there's several other signers of the Declaration of Independence that are in that cemetery. But there's a tradition that you put pennies on Ben Franklin's grave. I think it has something to do with maybe him coining the phrase, no pun intended, a penny saved is a penny earned. But there's the Franklin Center. I think it's the Center of Arts in Philadelphia. We saw it, we went by it, it's big, but we didn't get a chance to go there. But the penny saved is a penny earned. They take all the coins off the grave, and that go towards that. They apply that towards the operation of the Franklin Center. I may have been a little bit off on the naming. People from Philadelphia helped me out. And then I got a couple books that go over world disasters. And this one I think was printed in Great Britain, so it has a lot of history in it that I'm not familiar with, that I'm going to look forward to reading and get caught up on things that happened overseas. They touch on a couple things that happened here in the States, but they also go over the fire at the Crystal Palace, which I think was in the UK, a collision involving the Queen Mary, the Christmas Troop train crash, the Great London Smog, which I knew nothing of until we sat down and watched the movie about Sir Winston Churchill, and of course the Titanic. So I'm looking forward to checking that out. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is Around the World with a Camera. This is very similar to what Time Life did. Life magazine came out with a year in review, and they have hardcover books from, I think, definitely the 80s, maybe further back than that. But this looks like it was a series that was around for, I think, maybe 10 years, somewhere around 1909, 1910 up to around 1920. This is the only one that I have. It's a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. But it's basically things that were photographed around the world. And this one was done in 1913. It talks about the Titanic. Distinguished dead among the Titanic's heroes, a great tragedy's mourning and inspiration. Artists' concepts of what it would have looked like, the deadly menace of the iceberg. And in the same year there was severe flooding all along the Ohio River Valley. from Dayton, Cincinnati, as far north as Cleveland. But the southern part of the state was hit extremely hard, and it has a lot of pictures and history about that. It has a section in it on sports, which was very interesting for me to see because it showed one of the Cleveland players, Nap Lajoie or Nap Lajoie, depending upon what part of the world you're from and how you want to say that. But just a lot of interesting things in this book alone. I was pretty excited to pick up this book. So I think that's going to do it for the books. So I've rattled on here for quite a while. Made some editing that Mink's going to have to take care of. Sorry about that, Mink.
You're good.
So I hope everybody's healthy. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Have fun. Take pictures. Enjoy photography. And we'll see you again next week. Bye!